Streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and blasttheradio.com, this is The Lowell Green Show. The number to call and be heard around the world is 613-413-2217. Or email Lowell at blasttheradio.com. And now, here is Lowell Green.
Thank you, John. So, I say this to the protesters. You may not realize it, but you've won. It's time to go home, proudly home, and celebrate. Now, when I say the protesters have won, I mean it. Look at the evidence, please. No question that public opinion is shifting very rapidly, I think largely because of the various protests. Even though people may not always agree with the protesters or the methods that they use, it focuses the public attention to the problem. And I think when people begin to think about it, and they say, you know what, it's true. It's time that things opened up. Premiers, and look at the rest of the evidence. Premiers and health authorities, right across the country, they may deny that the protests have anything to do with it. Well, of course, they're going to deny that. But it's surely no coincidence that since the trucks arrived in Ottawa, think of it, Saskatchewan opening up completely, the vaccine mandates will end at midnight tonight in Alberta. Quebec, while not opening up fully, has relaxed most of the restrictions. Now, several of the maritime provinces are talking about doing away with many of the restrictions, including the mandates. Here in Ontario, even Doug Ford has indicated he may be prepared to speed up plans to reopen. As a matter of fact, I have some inside information. I think you're going to hear something from the Ford government within the next day or two, precisely that they're going to start opening things up. There can be no question, folks. Now, I'm sure that some of you will question, but as far as I am concerned, there's no question that all of this progress towards freeing us from the mandates is at least partially thanks to the incredible publicity. I mean, worldwide publicity. Canada and the convoys and the protests are featured in France and Holland and Germany and majorly, as you know, in the United States and in Australia. It's really quite astonishing. The protests have touched a nerve or several nerves pretty well right across the Western world. People, I think, everywhere beginning to realize, you know what? It's time. It's time that we begin to learn to live with COVID. We've got to deal with it just like we deal with the flu. And it's time to start opening up. I think that to a large degree, not entirely, but to a large degree, it's because of the publicity generated by the protests here in Canada, particularly the one here in Ottawa. There's just, to me, as far as I am concerned, there's no question that the protesters have won. So I say, you know what? Proudly go home. Do a victory dance. Go home before something serious happens. And here is what really, really concerns me. And I know I'm not alone in this. Go home, quit while you're still ahead, okay? It's a lesson that I learned a long time ago, and many of you as well. Don't let your victory be tainted by tragedy. Keep in mind, whether you are responsible for whatever happens here, accident or tragedy of any kind, you're going to be blamed. We all know the story of two people go in, try to light fire to an apartment. In all probability, nothing to do with the truckers, but the truckers are blamed. So no matter what happens, and I must tell you that while I'm not concerned about the children being here, I am sure that they're being well taken care of by good parents. Nonetheless, the fact that there are children and a good number of them on the scene just increases the risk of something, God forbid, really bad happening. Quit while you are ahead before something happens here that, among other things, is going to, I think, restore Trudeau's position, because there is no question that largely because of the protests, Trudeau is on the run. And I mean on the run when he's not hiding. I mean, even some of his own members, two of them now, two prominent members of his own caucus, have turned against him, saying that he is sowing division, that he is spreading hate, and it's got to stop, that the government itself, the liberal government, has got to stop doing this. So he's on the run. Don't let something happen to turn the victory to him. When you have won, you've won. The country is going to soon be totally open, which is what you want. The borders will be open, which is exactly what you've been fighting for. The mandates will be gone. I mean, the mandate's going to be gone in Saskatchewan and Alberta today. So take your victory, go home. And there's another reason why I think that the truckers, the protesters, should go home. Shut the barricades down. It is this. We have been very, very, very badly let down and continue to be betrayed and let down by our leaders at every level, from the mayor of the city of Ottawa right through to the police chief. The leadership has been abysmal, stumbling, fumbling, fearful, incompetent, mixed messages, no messages, can't decide what to do. The leadership has been terrible. So I ask the truckers, you be the adults. John Milkey is always saying somebody's got to be the adult here. Very clearly, our leaders are not being the adults in this. So you truckers, you be the adults. You say, you know what? If for no other reason, you may not agree that you have won everything that you want, but if for no other reason than the good of the country, it's time that somebody thought of the country. We've got to get this country back working again. We've got to stop fighting with each other. We've got to stop the divisiveness. We've got to stop the hate. We've got to get back to work. Folks, somebody has got to be the adult. And I'm appealing personally right now, and I know I'm not alone. The leaders won't do it. They are incapable of leadership. So you truckers, you do it. You've shown some great leadership in this. You've conducted a largely or almost totally peaceful protest. You have overcome incredible odds and incredibly biased media. You've overcome that. You've been steadfast in your peacefulness. Continue to be the adult. You've won. Go home. Do a victory dance. Take the plaudits of the people around you. You have won. Quit while you're ahead, please. John, I'd like to hear what people. I know that many people, many listeners, and we've heard from them here, John. They want the protests to continue, but I don't think that those people realize the precariousness of the situation. I don't think they realize that they have won and that it is time to go home. Even the Conservative Party, which has been, defending in many ways the protests and asking for an end to the hate, to the divisiveness, the Conservative Party is now saying, you know what, the time has come. You've done your job. Time has come to go home. And this is, as I say, I know that many of you think they should stay, but let's not take the risk. You've won. Quit while you're ahead. Take the plaudits, do the victory dance, leave the city, honk your horns leaving the city, and victory. But if the longer, I hope to God that nothing happens, and it probably would not. But with this number of people, with children involved, and including a few people that, let's just say, sometimes are missing a screw or two, the risk is there. Don't prolong the risk. Don't take the chance of losing everything that you've won. Go home. You can go home proudly. You can go home victorious. But time to go home. John, let's hear what people have to say. Anybody agree with me? Or
a lot of people agreeing with you. Yeah, but not everybody. My question is, I agree with you. I think we're playing with fire. The longer this goes on, we're playing with fire. We're starting to see a lot of these untowards trolling this thing, making comments, scaring the hell out of us, flooding the 911 lines to block it, etc. It's getting to a point where something really potentially bad can happen. My question to you is this, and I don't agree with you. Why are we conceding victory to the truckers? Would we not have been to a point where we would be opening up anyway, even if this protest hadn't have happened?
Eventually, but I don't think nearly as quickly. There is no question that the protests, and by the way, the protests are right across the country, has focused the public attention on this. The Canadian population usually is pretty compliant. We certainly have been compliant for 2.5 years. But I think that even though you may disagree with what's happened, it has focused public attention. I mean, that's what protests are all about. For example, there's no way that we would be nearly as gracious and hand nearly as much money to natives in this country were it not for all of the protests. We may deplore this blockage of trains, the stopping of pipelines, and so forth, but it's focused public attention because, and the only way these days, essentially, to focus public attention, you got to make a noise. Otherwise, you just get lost in the crowd. So my feeling is yes, eventually, but I think it has speeded things up greatly. And as I say, not just in Canada, but I think pretty well around the Western world. You
Okay.
may disagree, John, but
A little bit,
I,
but I
yeah,
accept that. Yeah, I accept that. Anyway,
can I tell you something? I mean,
yeah.
this is why people protest. People protest because they know it works. Look at the delays in the Trans Mountain pipeline because of protests. This is almost 7 years of delays. They stopped the Energy East. Why? Because of protests. So whether you enjoy it, whether you believe it or hate it or not, it works. The protests work. They've stopped pipelines. They've stopped railways. They've stopped roadways. They've stopped the cutting down of forests. Whether you agree or not, protests work. Go ahead.
All right. I'm going to turn things over to the listener because I have my own radio show, my own radio station, and a lot of social media at my disposal, and I'm hogging up way too much of the time.
No, you're not. No, it's a
Well,
very valid question.
no, but the listener's opinion matters. We
Yep.
both invite them in, and this is what it's about. Okay. 613-413-2217 is the number. Here's a text. Hi, Lowell. I agree. They have won. Trudeau is walking out and hiding, and as I mentioned yesterday, he has lost. It will show in the future. Robert is asking, go home to what?
Go home to victory. You came here, you wanted them to cancel the mandates. A lot of people come from Alberta. Alberta is canceling the mandates at midnight tonight. Is that not a freaking victory? I mean, you want the mandates canceled. They're going to be canceled at midnight tonight. How can you say, what do you mean, victory? Well, there's a victory right there in your own province. Go ahead.
Chrissy is on Twitch. She says, are we finally seeing some light at the end of the tunnel? Joshua says, no politicians would admit they were influenced by the protests without truth serum that would force them to admit they work for us, not we for them. Kathy on Facebook, did you read the articles written by Anthony Furett and Brian Lilly about Christine Elliott has no plans on removing vax passports and masks?
Yeah, but that's fine. But the fact is that Doug Ford, since then, here once again, this is public pressure because of the various protests. Doug Ford now has indicated that he may be willing to speed things up. There, do these work? Yeah, there's more evidence. Go ahead.
Well, you've always maintained that 100 letters is all it takes to get the attention. If 100 letters gets that kind of attention, what the hell is this doing?
I guess so.
Hazel says they want mandates canceled to borders. Provinces don't help that. Steve is on Facebook. He says,
hold it.
Yeah, holding it. Sorry.
Hold it. People, please, you got to be aware of what's going on here. You have to understand jurisdictions. The federal government is in charge of the mandate. The main convoy was started because of vaccine mandates at the border. That's a federal responsibility. It's also federal responsibility for masking decisions in airplanes, trains, interprovincial travel, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the other mandates, which stores can be open, restaurants, et cetera, that's provincial. But it's federal and provincial. But it's originally started because of the federal mandate at the border. Go ahead, please, John.
Barry says, make this show 1 hour, please, 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 please. Another text says, Trudeau would look like a hero if he would talk in peace to the protest instead of attacking them. He's not acting like a leader. like you said, there's
Well,
got to be an adult in the room.
there's one more evidence of how the truckers have won. It's Trudeau that looks weak. On this, it's true. In fact, as I pointed out, you don't think it's a victory when two of Trudeau's own senior cabinet or senior caucus members turn on him?
That's pretty huge.
That's a pretty big victory, I would
Yeah.
say. Go ahead.
Steve on Facebook, you were next up. He says the protests helped break up Trudeau's iron fist grip on the Liberal MPs. There you go,
Yes.
speaking to exactly
Thank
what
you.
we just said.
Thank you. Yep.
Jamie's watching on Twitch. He says, unfortunately, I think the governments were going to do that anyway without truckers' protest, and I admire them for hanging around for that weasel Trudeau to meet with them. Hazel says every leader stepping up, but obvious one, or she means except obvious one, is hurting economy now, so will end by real politicians. Caroline says totally agree, Lowell. They have been lucky so far. Jennifer St. Anne says I'm starting to lose my support. A convoy for freedom and exercising your democratic right to protest is one thing, but this is morphing into something I didn't show up to support.
See, this is one more reason why it's time to go. You've won. You've got some of Trudeau's own people turned against him. You have focused the nation's attention on this problem. You've acquired many supporters, but the longer you stay, the more of those supporters you're going to lose. And we've just heard from one. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think you're hurting the people you purport to help.
Yeah.
The longer you stick around. Shane just commented on Facebook a moment ago. He says, it's one thing for Justin to not listen to the trucker convoy, but for him to be abandoned by his own Liberal MPs says something about his support or lack thereof. Craig is also on Facebook. He says the legacy media abandoned all journalistic ethics when it came to covering this freedom convoy. There was no honest reporting, just bad faith smears, politically motivated character assassinations, and overly hyperbolic accusations of insurrections.
Yeah, that's to a large degree, that's very true. But it's interesting, John, that despite the terrible biased media coverage, mainstream, somehow or other, the news got out that, hey, wait a minute, this is pretty peaceful here. They're dancing, they're singing, etc., etc. That somehow or other, that message, despite the mainstream media's coverage here, the message about the truth has somehow leaked out. Not everybody has picked it up, but many people have. I think largely because of shows like this and social media in general. Go ahead, John.
Andre says, go home and let the businesses that have been hurting open back up. Ray, neighbors here in Tampa are convinced that Trump started this in order to show his support is global. I've heard that. I don't know if I believe it, but I've heard that.
That's so stupid.
Yeah, well.
And you know what? Actually, it's an insult to Canadians. To somehow or other think that, we wouldn't listen to our own people, but we're going to listen to Donald Trump. Come on.
There's a lot of suggestions, and I hear it on the Peter Mansbridge podcast too, where some of the experts in the States, they talk about just where are the U.S. dollars in this thing actually coming from?
Wow.
I'm just saying I've heard it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying I've heard it. Michelle, who is in Windsor, she's got an interesting point of view on things. She says, yep, time for them to go. It's exhausting people even further who have already been exhausted from restrictions for 2 years. This is just going to create more resentment if they don't. Dwight says, Lowell, this is not about truckers any longer. They are now being mixed into by Western separatists. Arthur says the protests have to last long enough to do enough damage.
Hold on. I'd like to comment on that.
Yep.
You know what my comment about that is? So what? They're Western separatists. Hey, if I lived in Alberta, I'd probably be a bloody separatist too. The way Alberta's been treated by the East. So what? They're Western separatists.
You want to talk?
I'm glad.
You want to talk oil industry right now?
Yeah, I mean, good.
They got every right to be pissed.
I'm glad they're here. For people to say, "Oh, this is very dangerous. We got Western separatists." Good thing. Good. Go ahead.
Hey, Lowell, do you want me to slow down on my reading of the comments so you can interject a little more quickly?
Okay. No, I'm quite capable of interjecting.
I know you are. All right. Dwight says, Lowell, this is not about the truckers anymore. Oh, sorry, Dwight, we just read your comment. Arthur says, the protests. No, I read that too. Sea to Sky says, yes, but even if it is lifted, the USA still has their mandates. Then what?
Can I tell you something? The pressure is on the United States to drop them as well. But you know what? Let's look after our own country. The United States may or may not, but let's deal with our own country. This idea that, there's no sense of us doing it because the Americans aren't. Screw that. This is Canada. Come on, folks. Come on. Go ahead, John.
Let's get a word in for Shields. We're at 20 after the hour.
Absolutely, Shields. Now, no matter where you are, a lot of people think, oh, Shields only deals with the Ottawa Valley. Well, they're very well known in the Ottawa Valley. They've been there since 1947, serving the Ottawa Valley. And people in the Valley know Shields very, very well, know they can be trusted. But increasingly, Shields now has begun. In fact, they will deliver all the way down there, and they do, all the way down to Cornwall, Brockville, Prescott, et cetera, and of course into the city of Ottawa. Huge warehouse, absolutely jammed with virtually every brand of appliance you've got, every size, every color, every price range, they've got it. And you know what? They're good people. The prices are very, very competitive, if not better. Shields. Have a look at it. I keep saying this. They've got a great website, so easy to use. www.shields, SCHEELS.ca. John.
Let me go to Tim. He says, I disagree. If the movement folds, it will be back to the way it was in no time at all. PM has done nothing. He's an embarrassment, and he must go.
No, it won't go back. The people have been roused. The public attention has been focused. You can't take that away. Go ahead.
Let me see. Ken says, Paul Anderson, a previously employed Trump advisor, has been seen in these protests and has personally tweeted about them.
Oh, this is terrible. I saw this. In fact, there's one of the big headlines on one of the news services. A Trump supporter actually seen here, to which I also respond, so what? I mean, come on. I mean, there were Canadians went down and worked for Biden. So there's somebody that once worked for Trump, and whether it's true or not, who the hell knows? But so what? Go ahead.
I'm sure there were Canadians in the crowd on January 6th. That,
people make these, this is terrible. There's Western separatists there. There's the Trump supporter there. I mean, come on, give me a break. Go ahead.
Dan says, end the border crossing slowdowns, keep up the good work, legislative buildings. Okay. Kathy says,
the one thing that people don't seem to be grasping, you have, John, and that is that the longer they stay here, the greater the risk that something very bad is going to happen, and they are going to be blamed.
That's my big fear. Well, yeah.
It's I was taught a long time ago, when you have won, give it up, leave, quit. Don't dwell on this. Don't gloat on it. But when you've won, stop. It's time. They have won. As I say, Alberta, the vaccine mandates end at midnight tonight. There's a victory right for many of you right there. Go ahead, John.
So here's the question again, but asked by Mark, and he's got a little bit more detail to his question. He says, home to what? Some truckers only have a truck to live in. Read a rent ad. They only want vaccinated people, so unvaccinated people have to live outside. What's wrong with this picture? Everyone should be treated equally.
Yeah, that's what they're fighting. They say they don't want this anymore. That's what, and increasingly, the provinces and the federal government hasn't agreed, but soon will, to stop it. So you have to pay attention here. What's going on? Go ahead.
Am I going to get my job back if they reverse the vaccine mandate within federal and federally regulated places? Asks Tammy. Russ says, listen to him, please. You have won. We have won. Thanks to all of you brave people. Trudeau will harm your children with his corrupt police.
Okay.
Darlene says, we shouldn't be dictated as to what we put in our bodies. If you don't get vaccinated, you lose your job. That's like if someone gets pregnant and decides to abort.
You know what? I don't want to get involved in that anymore. That's not the topic here. We've dealt with that topic for 2 years, okay? If you don't want to get vaccinated, you're nuts, but that's your right. Never denied that. That's your right. You've got that right. You don't have to be vaccinated. But let's move on, okay? The question is now, has the time have the truckers, the protesters, have they won? Is it time to go? If you don't think that there's a risk of something terrible happening, how about just doing it for the good of the country, being the adults here? Go ahead, please.
Anne says, when I see Randy Hillier and Mad Max inching further into these protests, the protests lose me. See, Bruce says,
hold it just a minute. Hold it.
Yep.
Can I ask the writer, do we live in a democracy or not? I mean, if you have a protest movement, as long as you're peaceful, do you have a right to join it or not? But because Mad Max joins or whatever, I don't know if I guess he spoke at one point, but so what? I mean, this is a free country. If they want, I can go up and address them. You can go up and address them. That doesn't mean that everybody there agrees. Go ahead, please.
And says regarding the comment about truckers not being able to rent a place if they are not vaxxed, aren't 85% of them vaccinated? So then it's not a huge problem. Seriously. Erlene says the job's not done yet. Trudeau hasn't stood up as a man yet. That would be a one job. It's not done yet.
This is one of the problems, you see. I fear that we're at a point now where, in fact, the protesters, as long as they stay, may be delaying Trudeau relaxing the mandates at the border. That's you think of it now. Trudeau knows that if he caves, that if he relaxes the mandate now, he's going to be accused of caving to protesters. One more reason, I think, if the protesters left, I would imagine that in a couple of days, Trudeau would relax the mandates. Could be wrong, but I suspect that. Go ahead, John.
So you say he's holding on to that card just to
That's right.
have some sort of victory for himself?
Yeah. It sort of puts him, in a way, it puts him politically over the barrel. If he gives in now, if he changes the mandates, then it appears that he's giving in to the protesters, which essentially he would. Go ahead.
Yep. Darlene's following up on her comment regarding vaccines. She says, yes, it's up to us if we want to be vaccinated. Exactly. However, my point is, if we don't get vaccinated, we lose our job. Hello.
That's what the protest is about. Please, you people got to stay aware of what's going on. That's what this is about. They say no more mandates. That's what they're saying. And Saskatchewan has said no more mandates, and so has Alberta. And very soon, I'm sure, so will Ontario and Quebec. Go ahead, please.
A comment from Terry. I live in Fort McMurray, Alberta, and I support the truckers and the protesting. The rest of the world didn't care as much when the oil pipeline protests cost our industry thousands and thousands.
Yeah, I know, but as the time, that's fine. But as the time, my question is, Jesus, hard to get people to comment. You get your brain to address the issue. You support it, great. But has the time come to leave? Have they won? Should they go home before something serious happens? That's the question. Go ahead, please.
Jeff says this is a complete victory for working Canadians and our children. It has uncovered the truth about money, politics, and the legacy media. What happened to the day when our elected leaders represented all Canadians and the news reported the news? How did we get to the place where the only people that matter to our politicians are the lobbyists, special interests, and their own hardcore voting base? Who can we trust? Asks Jeff.
Good point.
Let me see. Brian says, time to leave. They are hurting many by staying. Ken says, truckers, get the F out. There you go. Not mincing any words there, Ken. Thank you. Let me see what else we got here. Bruce says, nope. Even if the good ones go home, the bad ones will still be here, says Lori. They love all of this attention.
Oh, and you see, what a defeatist attitude. I mean, if the honest truckers, the honest protesters leave, that's 95%. So 5% are left, which the police can deal with. Come on, folks. Holy smokes. What's going on today? Go ahead, John.
So a direct answer to your question from Mark says no. Need answers from the federal government. Tim says the convoys made their point. Time to go home before this turns ugly.
Precisely. Thank you.
Yep. Another comment from Craig. He says Justin Trudeau and his Liberal government have shown no signs of making any changes to the federal mandates. What gives you the impression he will after the truckers leave?
Well, common sense. Common sense. The fact is that some of his own members, and now two don't forget, two members of fairly senior members have already spoken publicly, and they claim that there are many other Liberals who feel the same as they. So I believe that when the truckers finally leave, that only then can Trudeau relax the mandate. That's my feeling. Could be wrong, but I think common sense dictates that. Go ahead.
A text in at 613-413-2217. The truckers won. Thank you. You can go home now. Okay. Sean says they've never even had a conversation with anybody from the government. That's not how this works. Justin Trudeau thinks you can ignore them until they go away, and you're now encouraging them to do just that. If they leave, it's over. They have to stay. They're well aware that eventually police are going to come and drag them out of their trucks, and they're happy to have that happen. Christine says,
I'd like to address that. So you don't think the fact that Saskatchewan and Alberta are dropping mandate, you don't think that's a victory? You don't think the fact that that members of Trudeau's own caucus are turning against him. You don't think that's a victory? You know what? You got to be realistic here. You have to look at the facts and examine the facts, not what you think the facts should be, but what they are. Go ahead, please.
Justin doesn't have common sense, says Kim. He does not have common sense, says Janet. Come on. They have to stay longer. Christopher says they're not there just to make a point. They're there to affect change, which has not yet happened.
To those people who think that they should still stay, I understand that. But I ask you this. If something terrible happens, what are you going to say then? How can you deny the fact that the longer they stay, the large number of people, not everybody totally balanced, okay? There's children there. Do you not understand that the longer they stay, the greater the risk that something terrible will happen? Surely to God you can see that. Go ahead, John.
Richard says truckers would have more success if they left Ottawa and blocked the border crossings. When food, parts, and everything else that comes up across the border gets shut down, then the public will take a lot more notice.
Well, they're doing that actually at the Ambassador Bridge in Windsor.
They sure are. They sure are.
You know, one of the things that I find a little shocking is the lack of knowledge of following the daily news of so many people. To me is disappointing and a little bit shocking. I mean, it would appear to me that a lot of people simply are not following what's going on here. Go ahead, John.
Well, and of course the argument there is, who to follow on the news these days. Lori, this is the first time we've heard from you. She says Lowell is right. The point has been made. Maybe JT will drop the mandate sooner if the protest ends. A win for everyone. Lowell is such a critical thinker. I love it. Christine, her comment's been sitting there for a while. Finally getting a chance to get this on the air for you, Christine. She says the convoy seems to have really opened up the dialogue regarding the restrictions.
Yeah, it has.
Yep.
Got to move on here. Thank you all. I'm a little grumpy today. But as all I ask is when I throw a topic out, if we could, and many of you have, address the topic and not go back to something that we talked about 2 years ago. Thank you all. We'll be back tomorrow.
The Lowell Green Show is seen and heard live around the world at 2 p.m. Eastern. Connect with us online at blasttheradio.com/Lowell Green. Can't join us live? Download the Lowell Green Podcast. Available on Apple, Spotify, Google, and more. Ask your smart speaker to play the Lowell Green Podcast. This is a production of blasttheradio.com.